Hello everyone, I am Sa'ad العريفي, an assistant professor in cybersecurity at King Abdulaziz University. So for this conference, I come all the way from Jeddah, and Claire, she came from, no voice? Okay. Is it fine? Fine? Okay, okay. And Claire come all the way from Nairobi. You come from San Francisco, California, and Kansas, and we're staying in the same hotel, which is fun. I'm not in the field of security. I'm not in the field of philosophy. I'm in the field of cybersecurity. But we do have a lot of ethical dilemmas in cybersecurity. So, for example, if you have a data of a customer and someone who's not authorized read this data, whether to inform this customer or not. So we have a lot of ethical dilemmas, and I teach a course of ethics in IT. One of the main chapters in this course is about AI and ethics. The effects of AI and ethics on the employment, for example, and on my guest will discuss this area in more details. What is AI? AI in Arabic is in English is artificial intelligence, and in Arabic is الذكاء الاصطناعي, which means the algorithms and the data that is fed to the machine, so the machine can think like human beings and take decisions, analyze data, predict, learn. So in this session, we will discuss the effects of AI, which is artificial intelligence, in human relationships and other topics. My first guest is Miss Claire Matuka. Claire, she is a statistician, data scientist, and AI enthusiast, currently based in Nairobi, in Kenya. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in statistics and has acquired hands-on experience in the implementation of various AI and data science techniques and benefits business and clients across the world. She has served as a co-founder and head of AI for a tech startup based in Nairobi, Kenya. She has also held several data scientist positions. Additionally, Claire currently serves as Swiss Cognitive Global AI Ambassador, as well as Pan-African Technical Foundation Kenya representative, where she hosts virtual boot camps and conduct training on artificial intelligence. She's also an advisory board member of the Loop Q AI Prize. Claire has features in various conferences, including JETEX Global 2021 Conference and Global AI Summit 2022. So, Claire, the first question is, given the numerous applications of AI today, do you think they will positively or negatively influence personal relationship? Let me translate the question in Arabic. إيش تأثير الذكاء الاصطناعي على العلاقات الإنسانية في المستقبل؟ هل تؤثر عليها إيجابيا أو سلبيا؟ Please.
Thank you so much for that question and for that wonderful introduction. So as she has said, I am a data scientist. So in essence, what I do is I work building these algorithms, implementing them in businesses, industries, and in all these various businesses. So to begin with, I'd like to also define AI, right? Because when we first hear AI, if you have watched Star Wars, you probably know about CP3O or R2D2 and all these sci-fi depictions, and that's where our mind goes when we think about AI. But to me, AI is two things. One, it's systems that are autonomous, and two, it's systems that are adaptive. So what do I mean by this? Autonomy, that's basically a machine or a system that is able to handle tasks without any guidance from a human or a user. Two, adaptivity. What does that mean? It means a system that is able to improve by itself. It's able to learn from experience, and the experience in this case is data. So these AI systems that I am talking about right now are both autonomous and adaptive. So when I'm saying autonomy and adaptivity, examples are a recommendation engine in Netflix, for example, a chatbot, Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, all these things. I'm also talking about things like Dilla. It's an NLP, which basically, with the help of text, can be able to come up with art, right? So we are currently in an age of what I like to call narrow AI. The AI that we currently have is only able to do a single task at a time. We are not yet at the age of general AI, where AI has the sentient abilities, if I could say that, to think, to feel, to perform more than one task, to cook, translate, and do something else. We are not yet there. So this is the AI I am talking about right now, because general AI is probably 100 years away, but who knows, with the current infrastructure that is in place, it might happen sooner, but for now, let's focus on narrow AI. So I'm going to move on now to the question, which is about personal relationships. So when I think about personal relationships, I'm thinking about it in three ways. We have personal relationship with our friends, we have personal relationship with our family, and we also have romantic personal relationships. So these are the three kind of spectrums I'm going to focus on and what the effects of AI are. So just like with any tool, I believe there's a positive and there's also a negative. But there's a caveat to it, which I will mention at the end, because I'm a big fan of AI. I don't really see the negative side as much as I do the positive side. Although there are negatives, but I don't think that AI is the problem. So I'll explain on that at the end. So to begin with the positive, right? Human beings are in essence group-like creatures. We do not work well in solitary confinement. And that's because the people around us, they influence how we think, they influence our motivation, they give us support, and in essence, it drives us, makes us better people, right? So there are various ways in which AI will have and is already having an impact, a positive impact on personal relationships. So, for example, I'll take into consideration three major things. So, time, health, and then mental health. So, time. All AI and all machines, in essence, whether they are run by AI or not, their main goal is to save time, right? They need to save time so that we as humans can be able to focus on other tasks. And in this case, various AI applications. For example, right now, if you were to go and try and write an email, you would automatically get a response, right? Which will probably save your writing time from what? 5 minutes to 1 minute, who knows? That's time saved. You can imagine if you're working in an office setting or you're running a business, how many minutes in a day that is saving you, right? We can also look at something like personal assistants, the Google Assistants, the Alexa, the Siri. They're able to automatically book appointments in your calendar for you. They're able to automatically automate smart devices if you have these things in your houses. And this also saves you time. So my thinking is, okay, with AI, if it's able to save you time constantly, during the day, this enables you to have time to spend with your family, to have a simple 30-minute lunch, to go see your friends. And I think that that is quite a positive effect that AI is already having now, and it will continue to have in the future, right? So the second thing I'd like to mention is health, right? Health is a very sensitive topic, and I think that is because we all want to be healthy, right? If you have wealth, but you have no health, then you have nothing. So health is very important. And thanks to AI applications in health, we are able to save people's lives and able to save the people around you, right? Your family, your friends, your romantic partners, right? All thanks to AI. I was recently looking at a very interesting application of AI. So typically, it takes around 1 hour for someone who goes into cardiac arrest to get treatment, right? But thanks to AI and thanks to the technology that has been developed, this time has been reduced now to 30 minutes, right? And you know the thing with a cardiac arrest is that when you go into a cardiac arrest, your brain cells are literally dying by the minute. So in as much as, yes, your life might be saved at the end of it, what will happen again is that you will not have a normal life as you did before, right? You have lost some important neurons. And 1 hour is too much of a time for you to lose all that. So if you're able to cut it down by 30 minutes, that means that someone is able to have better health, and this also enables them to spend more time with their family. Like, come on, who doesn't want to have their family around, their friends around, and all these things. Another thing with health is I'd like to talk about autonomous cars, right? So the essence, I know there's a debate on autonomous cars and how they're somewhat making people lazy, but also they're helping prevent accidents, right? And if you prevent accidents, you save lives, right? I get to have my brother around. I get to have my sister around. And that extra time on this earth is what we all need. And I would say that that is also a positive effect that AI is having on personal relationships, because it's enabling the people around us to still be with us for a little bit longer. And then the third way I mentioned is through mental health. There has been an increased talk about mental health. So many people around us, be it your brother, your sister, your friend, someone is suffering from depression, and most of the time, we don't know, right? I can't tell. And thanks to AI and cognitive behavioral therapy, there have been applications, AI-powered apps that have been developed that can be able to deal with mental health. Because in essence, what studies have shown is that with such mental health problems, all a human needs is to be able to talk to someone. And this someone doesn't necessarily have to be a human. If an AI bot can be able to serve the purpose, that also helps in their mental health, right? And I feel like if your family, your friends, all these people have good mental health, it helps foster good personal relationships with them. And I think that's also a very good positive effect of having AI now and as well in the future. When it comes to romantic relationships, I feel like AI has really changed the game, because in as much as they're the negative side of having some of these matchmaking apps, the Tinder and the like in the market, there are also some positive effects, right? Because you're able to not only meet friends, but you're also to form personal relationships with people across the globe, relationships that you would otherwise have never ever formed. And that's a really, really good thing. And then finally, it's communication, right? I feel like it's very hard to develop a good relationship with someone if you're not able to communicate with them. Thanks to AI, we have language translation, right? Which means that I can communicate with everyone here, right? Whether you speak Arabic, whether I speak Swahili, whether you speak English, and whether I don't. And that's a positive effect of AI and how it can help foster further personal relationships.
I cannot wait to hear the negatives.
Thank you. So for the negatives, I'm going to say negative, but I'm going to end, as I've said, with a caveat, because I feel like at the end of the day, AI is a tool, right? And a tool is, we as humans are in control of how we use this tool. Whether we use it well or we misuse it, we are the controllers of how we use it. So the negatives, right? I'll start with influencing people, influencing decisions, right? In 2016, I think, you guys, my friends here are from the US. In 2016, during the US presidential election, right, there was a lot of Twitter buzz around those elections. And what was happening behind the scenes is that there were a lot of bots, right, that were basically sending out tweets just as a human would do, right? So if I was to read the tweet, I wouldn't know that it's not a human, rather it's a bot that has been programmed to do this. And what ended up happening is that it influenced majority of the decision of people. Because, you know, as human beings, we tend to follow the crowd. Yes, there are a few people who might not, but I personally, I will follow the crowd, and I will do as other people are doing. So if AI has the power to influence our thinking, influence our doing, I think it sometimes becomes negative, right? And that's one of the ways I would say that AI has influenced personal relationships in a negative way. The second thing is how we interact with these applications. I have a very small nephew. He's around 3 years old. And the thing with kids nowadays is that they're very, very good at working with tech, right? So one time I was listening to him give an order to Google Assistant. And something I noted is that he would say, Google, where is this, right? Google, where is Nairobi? Where is ABC? And there was a lack of empathy, right? If I was to talk to John and ask him, where is this, barking orders at him, I don't think that he would want to be a friend to me, right? I think he would actually hate me. And I feel like if we have a generation of kids growing up with this lack of empathy, lack of respect, lack of saying things like please, thank you, can you, kindly, and that's because they are so used to instructing the bots in this way. It then influences the personal relationships they get to have. Because even as a parent, I do not want my kid talking to me like that. As a brother or sister, I do not want my sibling talking to me like that. So I feel like that is also another negative effect that AI has on personal relationships. And then the other thing, my third point would be about people, right? So the thing with AI, as I've said, that's why I started off by saying that AI is currently narrow, right? We're in a narrow age. Even if you talk to Google, yes, she might have a good response, but trust you me, she does not understand what you're saying. She will not give you like the best response in the world. She will not correct you, right? Because at the end of the day, it's an AI. And what has happened with some people is that they've ended up developing some sort of extremely close relationship with AI systems. And when that happens, it also forces them to neglect the human side, right? Neglect having relationships with their family, because at the end of the day, I'm going and telling Google how bad my day at work was. I'm not telling my mom, I'm not telling my brother. And I feel like that also kind of makes it harder to develop personal relationships with each other if all I am doing as a person is speaking to an AI that in essence has no feelings, right? The relationship is one-sided, if I can say that. Because in as much as I might be attached to it, the AI is not attached to me in any way. And then something else, I know I mentioned the positive side of having matching AI apps like Tinder and whatnot. But there's also the negative side, right? Negative in that now people are using these apps to develop casual relationships, right? Which is honestly degrading the morals of ourselves as a society. And also they're using it to scam people. They're generating fake profiles. They're not uploading real pictures. And they're creating this sort of online persona around it, right? So what happens as human beings is that we don't trust other people because the people who are online can't be trusted as well. And I feel that's a very negative effect of AI. So remember when I said the caveat of the negatives? I don't know if anyone noticed, but all these negatives are from the misuse of AI, right? At the end of the day, all these AI applications had a purpose, but as humans, people misused it, right? And when you misuse it, it becomes evil, right? And that is in essence where the negatives are coming from. I like to say that a knife is a tool, right? In the hands of a chef, it can be used to prepare the most amazing meal in the world. In the hands of a thief, it can be used to, I don't know, puncture your tires or something bad like that. So in as much as AI has its negatives and it has its positives, for the future of personal relationships, I believe that we are in control of how we use it, how we misuse it. And yeah, thank you.
But the knife will not develop itself and be out of control.
Exactly.
But the AI robots, they might develop themselves and be out of control. How to solve this problem? It's a bit scary.
Okay, so I find that interesting because in essence, I build algorithms, right? So when you're building algorithms, right, for example, let's say I'm building an algorithm to recommend food to you, right? I'm in control of the data that I'm feeding it, right? I know we have a topic around AI bias and AI is gonna do this and it's gonna classify this person as this. But at the end of the day, currently, I am in control of the data that I feed it. I am in control of monitoring it. It's so many things that I am in control. If someone would tell me that an AI is out of control, I would be interested in what kind of algorithm they're using, honestly. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Very interesting speech. We'll go now to the second guest, which is Professor John Simon. John Simon is a professor of philosophy at the University of Kansas and director of the Center of Cyber-Social Research. He's an author of 11 edited volumes of over 60 articles and book chapters. John is committed to interdisciplinary cooperation in research and teaching, and his research has appeared in computer science, mathematics, applied economics journals in addition to philosophy journals. He was past editor-in-chief Synthesis 2002 and 2011, the leading journal in epistemology and philosophy of science, and has served as editorial board member of numerous of interdisciplinary journals and journals of philosophy. He currently serves as executive editor of philosophy and technology and editor-in-chief Axiomath, a lot of terms that is hard for me. Global philosophy. John is a regular participant in complexity science program and groups internationally and has served as visiting faculty at Peking University and the University of Lisbon. He's a member of the Institute International that's the Challenging the Philosophy and is associate member of the Institute the History, the Philosophy, the Science, the Techniques. I think this is in Paris. In 2022, he was elected a member of International Academy of Philosophy of Science. John has experience as department chair in 2 universities, including a stint as a chair of the Department of Economics at Kansas University. He has successfully led efforts to secure large extramural research funding from NSF, the Templeton Foundation, and United States Department of Defense. John,
thank you.
The question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Why is the discussion of close personal relationships a topic for philosophy rather than psychologists or sociologists? In Arabic, let me translate the question. لماذا نناقش تأثير ال AI على personal relationship من ناحية الفلسفة؟ المفروض نناقشها من ناحية علم الاجتماع أو علم النفس. But this is the question.
Thank you. So thanks for the kind introduction, and thank you all for being here. This is really an extraordinary experience. It's amazing that we have this philosophy conference in Riyadh in 2022, and I never thought I'd ever visit Saudi Arabia, and I'm delighted to be here. So thank you for your hospitality and your interest in the topic. I'm going to be talking about close personal relationships in the age of AI. This is a pressing concern for us because the condition of our personal relationships, our social networks, especially in the United States, is quite dire. We see a sort of a breakdown or a collapse in close personal relationships in the United States. And some optimistic promoters of technology, like Claire, see AI as a potential solution to the loneliness crisis in the United States. But I'm going to argue that human beings are not replaceable by artificial intelligence, even though technology can allow us to exercise some of the capacities and some of the goods that we associate with the social. It's going to be important that we make some distinctions. We need to distinguish the exercise of social capacities from the acquisition of certain kinds of social goods. And we need to recognize that social interactions, genuine social interactions, have morally salient imperatives. There are moral considerations that come with human relationships that we won't see in the case of our relationships with AI. I'm going to rush through this presentation because I've only got 20 minutes, but I'll try to give some of the reasons why human personal relationships are morally salient. These have to do with our characteristics, our finitude, our finite natures, our unique embodied perspectives, and our capacity to withdraw, our capacity to love one another in ways that exclude, that are exclusionary. And these are critical, central to what it is that makes human relationships valuable. I'm going to give you some evidence of the collapse in close personal relationships in the United States. This is a graph showing, you'll see here, men in 2021, 15% of men report having no friends in the United States. You see the number was relatively negligible in 1990. We could give you a whole range of statistics. For example, declining participation in religious community. You saw a steady 70% or so participation until the mid-2000s, where you see a collapse in participation in religious life in the United States. Marriage rates in the United States are roughly half what they were in 1990 by 2020, and so on and so forth. The cost of this is obvious. We see a dramatic increase in what are called deaths of despair in the United States. These are 2020 numbers. The numbers since 2020, 21, 22 are even more catastrophic and disturbing. So clearly, this is a fundamental problem. Now, can AI solve this problem? I mean, the optimists among us might say yes, there's some hope for that. The Canadian government has decided to treat this as a public health issue, treating the collapse in close personal relationships as equivalent to something like sedentary living or obesity or pollution as a cause of sickness and disease, morbidity and mortality. So this is a way of thinking about close personal relationships as good for health. So this is one way of characterizing the importance of these relationships, that they're good for preventing morbidity and mortality in populations. I think that's a very short-sighted conception of what a personal relationship is good for. It's not so what I would say is that close personal relationships are one of the goods that we live for. It's not that it's good to have them so that you can continue living. In fact, we live for our personal relationships. We want to be healthy in order to maintain our close personal relationships going forward. I would say also that as we go forward, I'll try to emphasize that relationships with human beings impose responsibilities. So they generate certain kinds of goods, but they also impose particular kinds of moral responsibilities. One important point that I think comes up in this literature is the idea of customizing our social relationships. So sociologists have pointed to evidence that as we become more prosperous, we tend to select or customize our friendships, our social interactions, and so on. One way this has been understood is to see close personal relationships almost as luxury goods in the United States. So it turns out that by now, wealthy people in the United States are more likely to get married and to stay married than poor people. So the conception here has been, or what's emerging is this idea that a stable, traditionally framed marriage in the United States is a luxury good. So is marriage and friendship, are they really luxury goods? Well, the sociology is mixed on this. It turns out that it's strikingly, the more prosperous we are, the fewer close personal relationships we have, the more time we spend alone, interestingly. Now, two relatively recent studies have shown that the way this works is that wealthier people tend to customize their relationships. They tend to spend less time with their families and neighbors than non-prosperous people. They tend to spend more time alone, but relative to their time, but they spend a larger proportion of their time with friends than family. Okay? So here we see an example of how friendships, personal relationships are valued. They are valued. They're valued in ways that are, in some sense, customized. So why is this? Well, because close personal relationships impose demands. So if we're in loving relationships or close social relationships with one another, they come with certain kinds of friction or cost, right? It's not easy to maintain a friendship or a marriage. So people with higher incomes generally pay to avoid some of these costs. They'd rather customize their social lives, evidence from sociology tells us, in ways that reduce these costs, reduce the friction. So one question is, given that most of us aren't prosperous in the world, can technology provide us with opportunities to have relationships, maybe loving relationships, without needing to have other human persons involved? So there's a whole range of chatbots that have been marketed. Replica is maybe one of the most prominent, that are designed to be sort of like low-cost solutions to the loneliness problem. So you're lonely, well, good luck, you can talk to a chatbot, okay? If you're... Chatbots like Replica are built on large language models. I'll say briefly what a large language model is. Replica came out in 2017 as a kind of a low-cost response to the demand for companionship. It was originally designed as a kind of a therapy chatbot of sorts. It was the kind of thing that would tell you, for example, that it would act like it was concerned about you and would encourage you to engage in healthy behaviors. It's shifted, right? Venture capital demands some sort of capital flow. So there was an initial investment of 6.5 million into the company. The people who invested need their money back, so they demand some sort of profit out of the product. So by today, Replica AI is driven by addiction and engagement. So it's an engagement model. It's a subscription-based model. The actual chatbot is, as to use Claire's word, evil. It is now a sort of a seductive, quasi-pornographic platform that is built to maintain engagement and is driven by subscribers. So people pay to participate in this. And it's being used. So there's roughly 1 million daily users of Replica in the United States. There are 10 million registered users. And obviously during the pandemic, when people were stuck at home, it became increasingly popular. So Replica has as its motto, always there for you. What is the phrase? Always here to listen and talk, always on your side, right? So it's the promise of a kind of fully reliable, low friction, low cost relationship. It's an AI, a sophisticated AI. It's on an earlier version of GPT. It's GPT-2, I think it runs, and it's highly addictive. People enjoy using it and so on. So what are these things? These things are built on, Claire briefly touched on this, on language models. So a large language model is nothing but a statistical distribution over some large data set, so over the training set. So in the case of, for example, language, GPT-3, for example, the current version of GPT, has as its training set the entire corpus of text on the internet, all of the text on the internet. So every month, Common Crawl gathers, it's a nonprofit that gathers all of the text on the internet and archives that as a training set for these language models. These language models are basically determinations of how probable some sequence of words is in that corpus. So how likely is it that some sequence of words appears in the corpus? Don't be dazzled by AI. I mean, AI is an extraordinary accomplishment, but that is at bottom all that this is, a distribution of probability of sequences of words from a training set. It's nothing more. So we could talk about these chatbots and how they're engaged with predominantly Americans at this point. And we see that they are, in some sense, social agents. To be a social agent, you don't have to be a full-grown adult human person. So for example, in some ways, dogs, cats, other animals are part of our social world. Some machines are part of our social world in various ways. Now, we can distinguish between degrees of agency in this context. And a chatbot will ultimately, or can, or is currently replacing humans in some economic context, some social roles, some kinds of employment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, there we go. And we could also say, to be positive with Claire, that these things allow for the exercise of some kinds of social capacities. So we're working, for example, on a nostalgia bot. A nostalgia bot is designed, it's a chat bot designed for the elderly, for elderly people who don't have the opportunity to engage in discussions that were relevant to their age cohort. For you might be the last one alive who remembers particular events, et cetera, et cetera. The chatbot would be a willing participant that would allow the elderly to exercise some of these nostalgic capacities. I can say more about this project during Q&A. It's a really great project. And in some ways, this is great because your peers are dead. Your friends are few and far between. Maybe your children have no interest in talking about these topics. So at least, we would say, at least you get to exercise those capacities. So then we might say, okay, there are contexts where these interactions are beneficial qua the exercise of those capacities. So insofar as you get to exercise those capacities, and there are going to be categories of people for whom there would be no other opportunity, then those are good. We'd call those good. But notice that there are fundamental differences between exercising social capacities, doing social-like things, and having social relationships. Okay? So think of spending money versus pretending to spend money. Think of telling a lie to another person versus talking to yourself in private. Think of exercising your vocal cords versus making a promise. In some important sense, you cannot make a promise to a chatbot. So you can certainly not be held responsible for breaking your promise to Replica. So these kinds of chatbots are like toys. They're like dolls. And they involve a level of suspension of disbelief. We can distinguish between other forms of play and chatbots, if you'd like, going forward. And it's not new, ultimately. So if you go back to Ovid, to the Metamorphosis, where Pygmalion makes Galatea, the statue that comes to life, it's a similar kind of desire that motivates us to build these artificial friends, these AI friends. Remember, Pygmalion makes Galatea, the statue that comes to life, because he's sick of women, right? He's tired of the vices of women, so he makes his own woman out of ivory, and Venus makes her come to life in the story, etc. So these are very traditional themes in the history of literature, for example. The difference between relationships between us and relationships with Galatea or with Replica or other imagined companions is that we, unlike Replica, are finite. There's only so much we can give to one another. We're not always there, and we're not always on your side, unlike Replica, and we don't always care. So we have unique embodied histories and perspectives in a way that an abstract object, so remember I described to you what an LLM is, what a large language model is. It is an abstract object. It is a mathematical object. We are not mathematical objects. We are embodied, we are present, we have histories and so on. And we also have the capacity to withdraw. So unlike an algorithm that's built to comply as a slave, as sort of an idealized slave or idealized representation, we human beings have the capacity to withdraw our love and to exclude others. And that capacity is critical. We don't love everyone. We don't even love the same person in the same way all the time, etc. Again, we're not always there and we're not always on your side and we don't always care. And that's critical. So by contrast, the sort of consumer culture of the United States is interested in creating customizable, comfortable, friction-free relationships such that you can exercise some of the social capacities without being involved in a socially, any kind of imperative, responsibility-driven relationship. The human relationships, by contrast, are always going to be driven by embodied particularity, the embodied particularity of being a human being. Whereas these learning systems, again, are multiply realizable abstract objects. If you've seen the movie Her, you'll know a little bit about how this story goes. I'm going to skip this for the sake of time. But ultimately, our limited, embodied nature makes it impossible to love in a non-exclusive way or a non-exclusionary way, in the way that the AI in this movie, Her, Samantha is the name of the AI in the movie Her, seemed to be, or reported to be able to do. So Joaquin Phoenix's character he falls in love with his chatbot. He falls in love with his AI. He's shocked to learn that she's talking to thousands and thousands of people simultaneously, and that she's fallen in love with hundreds of people, right? So now, the key here isn't so much, okay, well, Joaquin Phoenix has proprietary, sort of typically male feelings towards his girlfriend or something like that. That's not it. What's much deeper here is the idea that we immediately recognize, and I think Joaquin Phoenix's character recognizes, that Samantha does not love anyone. So she doesn't love anyone because she acts like she loves hundreds of people, right? So in the same way that, for example, if someone was a sperm donor and has thousands and thousands of children, right? We could doubt that he's really a father. To exclude is a necessary part of being in a human relationship. So close personal relationships impose also, and this is critically, and this is new territory, I think, for philosophy. Close personal relationships impose obligations, impose moral obligations. So even in the United States, where we have a consumerist attitude towards our relationships, where we wish to customize our relationships, we recognize, for example, that the parent-child relation comes with some critical obligations. If you're a parent to a child, you are going to be morally obliged to that child in a way that's not necessarily chosen by you. You cannot customize your moral responsibilities towards your child. Philosophers like Carol Gilligan, who's the founder of care ethics, and in another tradition, Hans Jonas, both recognize that the parent-child relationship, or the relationship that all adults have to children, imposes some moral responsibility. Hans Jonas called it the imperative of responsibility. And we see also that close personal relationships of different kinds come with associated moral obligations. So we might think spousal obligations are maybe not quite as compelling as parent-child relationships, but they're still compelling, even to Americans. We might think that duties to parents are compelling. Duties to parents in the Arab world, of course, are very compelling, but in the United States, we find them less so. Sibling relationships and so on also impose certain kinds of moral relationships or moral obligations that cannot be avoided. So I want to thank you for your attention. I know I went quickly and I skipped over quite a bit, but great. Thank you.
I have a question. What if this creates unrealistic environment for people? For example, if AI-based technology replace my friend, so my friend is not always there to support me, and this is the normal life. But if this artificial intelligence-based friend is always there, I might learn the wrong lesson. I might not be able to be alone for some time, then figure out my problems and solve it and grow naturally. So what do you think?
I agree that this is a profound danger, that the temptation of these technologies is to cater to a particular desire to customize, to reduce friction, to make things easy, make things as morally neutral as possible. So your initial question was, why is this about philosophy and not about psychology, for example, or sociology? So of course we're learning from sociology and psychology about the nature of personal relationships. Much of the data that I drew from at the beginning was sociological data, but psychologists are not going to help us understand the moral obligations associated with your relationship to your parents, for example. So what a psychologist can do is to tell you how to maximize your well-being, your happiness, your et cetera, et cetera. Preference satisfaction is the job of most psychology. Just being in the business of satisfying preferences misses what's critical here, in my view, is that we risk abandoning morally relevant and morally obligatory kinds of relationships, or not doing justice to those kinds of relationships, given these easy alternatives, given these easy technologies. And that's a genuine danger that I feel has not been fully explored. Psychology is not going to help us with that question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll come to John Sallins. Professor John Sallins teaches at Sonoma State University in California, near San Francisco. He's the director of programming for the Center of Ethics, Law and Society. He's also the co-lead instructor at the Summer Institute in Technology Ethics. This is open to all international advanced graduate students and early career faculty. He consults with Silicon Valley corporations and technology governance organization, and is the co-chair of the IEEE P7008 standards for ethical nudging in AIS systems. In his free time, he's a fencing coach and material arts instructor. The question for Professor John: what role do you think philosophy has to play in science and engineering? And let me translate the question. ما هو الدور الذي قد تلعبه الفلسفة في العلوم وفي الهندسة? Please.
Thank you. So the quick answer to your question is philosophy has everything to do with science and technology. And I suppose I should mention that I come from a tradition in philosophy that's often called naturalism, which is the belief that philosophy should be continuous with and supportive of science. So I don't really see a distinction between philosophy and science, although we're interested in the same thing but coming at it from different angles. In addition, so what does it have to do with engineering? I began as an engineering student, so as an aviation engineering student, and as part of that curriculum as a young man in that field, we had to take a class on philosophy and technology. And I found that really interesting. In that class, I learned that philosophy is continuous with technology, in that every philosophy is an attempt to build a system, and so it's just exactly the same as system engineering. My mentor in that program, Dr. Scott Nome Cook, was working at Xerox Palo Alto Research Laboratory at that time. That's the place that made the mouse and the graphical user interface and Ethernet and just everything that we use today in human computer interactions. And so I was brought up there as a graduate student, and I learned from some of the greatest computer science engineers in the world up there. And what I found interesting was their keen interest in philosophy and their belief that you know, I was up there and my mentor was there not in spite of being philosophers, but because they wanted us to be there and they wanted us to bring philosophical insight into the design process. So I see philosophical questions, questions of value, questions of ethics, questions of epistemology as additional design constraints whenever you're building a system of any sort. So just like an engineer would have to follow a budget or follow the design dictates of their customer, society places design dictates in the form of ethics and responsibility, and those are just additional things that all engineers have to deal with. So with that in mind, I'd like to show you an example of how this works. So what I'm going to show you is work that we've been doing in the IEEE, which is International Engineering Association, on developing standards for robot nudging. So to keep this in the realm of the conference today, we are talking a lot about space exploration, and there is no conceivable way we're going to go places like the speaker told us yesterday about our trip to Mars. That's going to include a lot of AI, and it's going to include a lot of robots. In fact, our robots are already there, right? They are on Mars already. So robotics is a huge piece of this puzzle. So I want to look at specific issues, specific ethical issues that arise when humans interact closely with robots. My colleagues have very nicely laid the groundwork for us, so I can gloss over a lot of things that I would normally go over. But we have heard about AI systems, the distinction between narrow and strong AI, the relationships that are quickly and easily formed by humans with machines. And this is an attempt to try to develop real engineering design constraints around those realities. So how much time do we have so I don't blow it?
15 minutes.
15? Okay, great. All right. So I'll just go through this really quick. As John said, it's a wonderful thrill to be here. I'm really, really excited to be in the Middle East. And these people that I have listed on the screen are the reason I'm here. All of them played an instrumental role in getting me here, especially Dr. Hassan Al-Sharif, who invited both of us to come. So let's talk a little bit about nudging. What is nudging? So nudging is a little bit different than direction. So what Claire was talking about earlier, when you demand something from a system or a person. A nudge is small, subtle cues that are delivered over time to that greatly alter the behavior of a person that is being nudged. So this has been talked about for some time. Nudges are not new. I think they came into the lexicon around the 90s or so. And instantly, they were offered in England initially as a way to kind of help, nudge. Maybe there's a way the government could nudge its citizens to not eat so unhealthily, right? And so as that was experimented with, many philosophers came back with criticisms that this is paternalistic, it's manipulating people in a gross way with their psychology, it's social engineering of the worst sort. Maybe it doesn't even work, maybe it's just based on pseudoscience or fake sociology or junk psychology, and it focuses on short-term versus long-term benefits. Nudging at the governance level, this is a very tricky question. I think I'm going to punt on this and not talk about it in this particular context, but you can kind of get a sense from the slide here. What's the difference between nudging from a governance level and just propaganda? And that's a really important question. We can talk about it during question and answers if you want to. What I'm interested in, and what my colleagues are interested in, is can we, there are certain things that nudging is good for and could be ethically designed to do. So for instance, my watch, tells me how much exercise I've had today. It's telling me that I've been sitting too long and I should stand. These are helpful nudges. And we're starting to get very used to these from our iWatches and iPhones. So those, I think, are interesting initial examples of nudges that might not be all that bad, right? They might actually be healthy for us. So I want to go through this really quickly. I've got a bunch of different examples. What are these robotic systems that are existent today that utilize certain kinds of nudges? So this is an example of a grocery machine that follows you through the store, nudges you to buy this product or that product. This is used in China. Here's another kind of nudge, which would be an optimizing system. So this is a little machine that will take you through the museum and direct you to where you want to go. This one, I think, is the one I'm really interested in, and I thought more was going to happen with this than actually occurred. But during the COVID shutdown, these machines were used to interact with tourists who were trapped in hotels in China, and to keep them in their rooms and to bring them their towels and food and different things, but to control their behavior and to keep them from infecting other people. This one is, of course, robotic pets, which are absolutely nudging us the same way a dog would nudge you into changing your behavior. We talked a little bit about intimate systems. I don't have a picture up here because they make me blush, but I know that you will do your homework and look them up yourself. So just Harmony, Real Doll, you'll have hours of fun with that. So these are, a machine like that can manipulate you sexually. That's fairly scary. And then we have security and rescue systems, which I think are really interesting. So this would be an attempt to try to nudge you into not hyperventilating, to stay safe in a rescue kind of situation. These would be very similar to the kind of machines that we would see in space exploration as well. The cobots and chatbots, we just had a great talk about, so I will go through that one super fast. Let's talk about some of the criticisms. So what kind of nudges should be on or off the table? So my colleague, Ron Arkin at Georgia Tech, has done some really interesting experiments where he builds robots that are designed to lie to you. They are designed to lie to you. So is a platonic lie, a lie that's in your best interest, good for you? What about that rescue robot? you're trapped under rubble. The robot comes to you first, and the robot, and the robot says, "Don't worry, help is on the way." The robot knows for sure that help is hours away, right? Hours away. It knows this exactly, right? Would it help for the robot to be honest with you and say, I don't know, it looks like a day and a half. Can you hang out in the rubble here for a day and a half? So it's best to lie in that situation. And this is, so Ronald Arkin has been discovering ways that machines can lie to you in ways that you don't think they're lying. You think they're telling the truth. Is that ethical or is that unethical? Should we allow engineers like Ron to build machines like this or not? So what is an ethically justifiable nudge? This is an initial draft that we did in the ethically aligned design document, and I'm not going to spend much time on it because we've moved a little bit beyond it. But some of the key takeaways from this is we have to try to cover all forms of ethical systems in our standard, not just the traditional American, European ethics, but ethics from the Middle East, ethics from Eastern cultures, ethics from Africa. All of these are very important traditions. They're all subtly different on the way they feel about these things. This is the definition that I want to sort of talk about, and this is the one where we try to navigate around all of the various cultural aspects about ethics and hook into the idea that the UN has a Charter of Human Rights. And so this is at least like a bottom line justification that engineers can build to. Within various cultures, they can add more or take some things away, but they can't go beyond this bottom line of hanging on to these core human rights that we have in the UN Charter. Okay, I want to go through this part fast, but here's some of the things: coercion, deception, transparency. Real quick examples. So I've shown you some maybe possibly problematic examples. Here's a less problematic example, so one where nudging might be very beneficial. I don't know if this is true in Arabic, but it is true in many languages where it's not true in English. We don't have gendered pronouns, or we don't use gendered words, right? But in German, for instance, gender is all around it. So if you want to change the language, as many Germans do, to make it more egalitarian, this machine is here to help nudge students to do that.
Arabic is
this one,
same as German. The Arabic language is same as German in this regard.
Oh, is it? It's the same. Yeah. So then you could definitely use a machine like this if you were. I'm not saying your culture should, but if your culture became interested in wanting to alter its language, then this is a system, and it is currently, there's experiments going on, and it seems to actually work. It seems to cause young students to become more aware of the gendered nature of their language and to fix it. This particular system is really interesting. It was used during COVID, and I like to bring it up because it's actually kind of funny. So this is a Boston Dynamics machine, and it was used to try to get people to socially distance and maintain all of those weird laws that we were trying to do during COVID. And it was deployed in 4 very distinct cultures and had 4 very distinct reactions to it. So in one place it was deployed in Singapore, and it worked fairly well. In Singapore, people followed the nudges of the robot. In Hawaii, people didn't really care. In Germany, they were a little skeptical of it, and when it was deployed in New York City, people smashed it with baseball bats. So people's cultural reactions to robot nudges are really important and very different depending on the culture that you put these in. The last thing that I want to talk about is my own experiments with working on machines that interact with elderly dementia patients. So this is work I'm doing with a robotics engineer in Palermo. And this is pretty deep right here. But I just want to put this up on here, and we can talk about it later. I'm here, all day tomorrow if you want to talk about this. But if you're interested, like I know some of you are, Claire brought up the distinction between narrow and general intelligence. I have a theory that general intelligence requires phronesis, and phronesis is the ability to skillfully move from problem set to problem set in a wise and skillful manner. It's an ancient Greek term. There's a lot going on here, but I get this from the American philosopher John Dewey, who has this really beautiful argument about the role that phronesis plays. It goes back to answering your initial question. Does anybody get out of phronesis? So for instance, when I deal with scientists and engineers, oftentimes they tell me, ethics is not my job, right? My job is to build things. John Dewey's argument is that phronesis is involved always in every decision, even the most technical decision. So even the most technical decision is an ethical decision. And so our robots, if we're going to ever trust them to nudge us in healthful ways, are going to have this skill that I call artificial phronesis. You can call it artificial wisdom. And it's explained in this book that I wrote with some co-authors, and happy to discuss this at length with anybody that wants to. And I think that's pretty much it. This is just the experiment. We can talk about that later. Not that important. This is extremely important. Please join us. The IEEE is an international organization. We do not have enough voices from Africa or the Middle East, and we need more voices. So if you want to get involved in this, we're not quite done with the standard. We have about 6 more months work to do on it, and so you can still have some input into this. And if you want to talk about that, again, I'm here all weekend, and I can get you set up with that. And with that, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. It's clear now how philosophy is involved in science and engineering. And when you talk about narrow AI and general AI, I imagine a robot with half knowledge and a robot with full knowledge. If a robot with half knowledge, or if the AI developed to be exactly same as human beings, it's fine. Human beings, we know how to deal with them. Mm-hmm. But if they have only half of the knowledge, they might take crazy decisions because they don't have all the knowledge around. Does the general AI will create something that has the full knowledge? Both of you.
Yeah, I have something to say, but I'd like to hear Claire first.
Well, my answer is quite interesting because when you say develop full knowledge, my answer would be we'll know when we reach that bridge. Like when we cross that bridge,
You're taking
we'll know.
very high risk.
Yes, but for now, I'm still sticking to my answer. I feel like it would take, as human beings, right? I'm Claire right now. During the day, I can code and do data science. I can also cook. I can also clean. I'm able to do so many multiple tasks. And that's in essence what we could say would be general AI. But narrow AI is what we have right now, right? We only have a chatbot which is able to process text. We only have another chatbot which is only able to process voice. So it will take some time for an AI or a machine to be able to do all these tasks and then, quote unquote, develop the full knowledge that you're talking about. Yeah.
Thank you. Professor John?
Yeah, so the book that I was talking about that came out last year, in it we outline at least 8 massive philosophical hurdles to general artificial intelligence. those do not appear for narrow artificial intelligence. So we can build all kinds of narrow systems all day, every day. But where this becomes a problem is when these systems, one example I use is like the Microsoft Tay example, a chatbot that was narrowly designed to try to pick up slang from young users on text. Within 24 hours, it became a racist and a Nazi. Within 24 hours, right? Because it does not have this skill that I'm talking about, this phronesis skill. It's mimicking you like my colleague Mitchell calls this a stochastic parrot, right? So they are very clever parrots, but they're parrots nonetheless. And so it was fed by online trolls all this these nasty comments, and it spits them back out, right, instantly, in clever and very interesting ways. But still, that's all it is. So we are in a very dangerous state. Sometimes I've got a slide that I sometimes show, which shows, if we increase autonomy without increasing wisdom, we wind up in an extremely dangerous place. Like imagine we give a machine all the nuclear codes and just tell it, do what you want, right? That would be a foolish thing for us to do, but we could do it, and the machine would wind up trashing the planet without even knowing about it or caring, right? What we want is this very difficult process of trying to build machines that are autonomous and know what they're doing. And that's a territory that, like I say, I think there's 8 huge hurdles to get into that territory.
Well, we're still taking very high risk.
Yes, exactly. We're taking the risk. We're not getting the reward.
Thank you. Do we still have time for questions? Good. Questions, please.
Thank you very much for such an important discussion here. So I highly agree with your last point there, John, about the importance of having ethics built into the systems. And there, I guess, we come to this importance of having a multidisciplinary approach, right? But I also wanted to go back to the example John was using on chatbots, and remembering the example that we had with medicine, Ashley Medicine. For those who don't know, it's the case where we had, essentially it was a website that encouraged affairs, and people were having interactions and building relationships. And there was a large cybersecurity issue, and only later people found out that the majority of those interactions were actually with chatbots. And I think that brings the importance as well of something that we call transparency, right? Which is one of the principles that need to be built into these systems and these developments. But then going back to the other thing you said about building wisdom, I guess my question is around that in all these scenarios, it becomes clear that maybe one of the most important things is to build wisdom, and also the way that we interact with these systems. It's different that we can rely on our watch to tell us when we need to exercise, but when we are not really aware of the boundaries of our relationship with robots and so on. Yeah. So our future is almost dependent on how we're building our education now and empowering wisdom to be able to interact with these systems. So I guess my question is, what sort of actions and steps do you think we need to take in terms of preparing humanity for these developments that are already happening and will continue to happen even more, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to start with a short answer to that question, which is AI is very good at doing things that we are very bad at, and it does them extremely well, and vice versa, right? We are the wise ones. If sometimes we fail utterly, but if there's going to be wisdom, it's going to come from us, and that's what we have to bring into this. So I think we should think of AI as always as AI systems. The user is really important. I'm really hate the kind of design thinking where we want to do something eliminate the human from any role in the process, because we eliminate the wisdom and we build algorithmic bias and machines that like Microsoft Tay. What we want is we need wise people, and there again becomes the prominence of the humanities. The future for humans is the humanities. The machines don't care about us. Only we can care about us, and that's why we have to develop the humanities. We now have the opportunity to do that because we don't have to work so hard. The machines will do the dumb, boring labor for us. We are now freed to become wise human beings, and I want our machines to help us, our engineers to help build systems in which phronesis can bubble out of it, whether it comes from the machine or the human, or more likely the two working together.
Thank you. Another question?
I would like to get your point of view on the topic of transparency and regulation. If I just observe my 18-year-old daughter or the Saudi colleagues that I'm fortunate to work with that are also working in data science, I think we have come to the point where a lot of young people already spend, or their relationships are already more digital than they are person to person. And we see AI infiltrate in these relationships. And a lot of people don't even realize, and maybe a lot of young children won't even realize at what point they're looking at something that is fake versus something that is real. How do you see the responsibility of government regulation and transparency if we at the same time observe a company like Twitter that's trying to basically scale down all regulation and control?
Yeah, don't bring up Twitter. That makes me sad. Do you want to take that one, John?
So inevitably, we're going to have to sort of recognize that these technologies are affecting us in serious ways. And, in the same way that it took a long time for us to figure out how to regulate pollution and pollutants in the natural environment, we're going to have to attend to harmful effects on the social environment, on social norms, on institutions, and on relationships. To go back to Kelly's question earlier, that involves understanding what matters, understanding that, your relationship with your spouse comes with certain moral obligations. Your relationship with your children comes with certain moral obligations. And that, strikingly, is something that we actually need to be reminded of. We need to learn those things. When we see the effects of highly manipulative, the word engagement is used a lot in tech. Mm-hmm. Engagement means addiction, right? The way that tech companies use strategies for increased engagement, as they would put it, those are highly manipulative, beyond nudging. Those are straightforwardly manipulative. We're in a position as, let's say, in terms of regulation, our task really is to recognize these things as obnoxious harms. They're highly profitable. California has given us many good things, but this is an example of where California has really ruined us, right? And we can take a step back. So it requires us to be critical. It requires us to see alternatives, that there are other ways of being, there are other ways of living. We don't have to be consumerists. We don't have to be driven by desire satisfaction. And we raise our children to recognize that there are moral obligations that we have to one another. Simple as that.
Hello. I just wanted to talk about the wisdom aspect and then the ecosystem of the artificial intelligence. In the wisdom, usually wisdom stems from either mistakes of people or a good foresight of what could happen and may happen, right, and try to avoid it. This is one aspect that in order to integrate that, we really have to think on whatever we're doing, narrow or wide, whatever you want to terms, is how to include, what could happen. So you cannot, you can use the failure aspect and build on, how to mitigate that, or you look in the future, what could happen wrong. All right, so that's the wisdom aspect. Now, the whole idea of artificial intelligence is to mimic humans and to make them do something without perhaps the ethical or something. It's somebody else who's talking. It's not me. I should not have a legal implication on me in general. But the fact is, what's going to happen is even these artificial intelligence beings that we create will also be regulated, as we can see. And the whole scene will be regulated. Now, the regulators, they change their mind, they see things one way or so on. So it's a moving target. How do you see this integration, the development of the ecosystem moving forward, and with the challenges and limitations of technology as it is today, what's going to happen? How are we, and how long is it going to take us? Thank you.
I have some comments. So just about AI regulation. So, I from Silicon Valley. I speak to a lot of people in Silicon Valley, and everybody in Silicon Valley is allergic to regulation. They don't want it. But they also want guidance. So, so this is why we came up in the IEEE with this idea of, first we started with AI ethics pronouncements, right? And there's all these guidelines. There's 300 easily different guidelines, AI ethics guidelines. They're wonderful. They're beautiful. Read any of them. They're all great. But they have no power to change anything that happens. Regulation has power to change what happens, but it's often not, it's heavy-handed, and it can stifle innovation. So what we're trying to find is this middle ground, the standards, right? So standards are the same reason why my USB plug works here and in America and anywhere else, right? That's a engineering standard. So what we're trying to provide engineers with is something in a language that they can already understand, a standard for plugging your thing into multiple cultures, so that you don't, so you at least don't do the gross unethical mistakes. And so, so that's what we're going to try next. And fingers crossed. Hopefully, it will be better than the last two options. Mm-hmm. And the wisdom. Oh, you want to bring in the wisdom? I think I'm one of the few people talking about wisdom. Oh, there's 5 of us, and so that's the. What I'm really interested in, and this question we may have a negative question. I bring in this concept from Dewey. Phronesis is really important for intelligence. There isn't an a priori reason why a machine can't necessarily achieve wisdom, but there are a lot of practical reasons why it can't. So when you ask how long will it take, it may take centuries. Right, it may take centuries, and that's no good for us here in this room. But it may not. It's an empirical question. We just have to keep hammering at it and see what's happening. So this is why I do the work that I'm doing in Palermo. Is we're trying to see, can we build a system that causes people to behave with more wisdom and clarity with dementia patients than they would have otherwise, right? And that's what we hope to achieve. We'll have some results. The experiments are going on right now, and we'll have some results. I can send anybody that wants it like a preprint of the paper right around early spring is when we'll have the preprint of that paper. So if you're interested, catch up with us then. But that's the direction that I'm going. And there's this other movement called artificial wisdom, which is a small but growing movement of philosophers and engineers who are chasing other possibilities of achieving systems like this.
Thank you.
As you talked about the nudging and ethical issues related with nudging, I'm a physician and I'm interested in nudging. So I have a question. It's about, I don't want to sound paternalistic, but if I, as a government, responsible for the health of my population, and I am paying for their health, to maintain their health, shouldn't I be, as a government, be allowed to nudge them to make the healthy choices?
Yeah, so you want to get into that. Anybody want to bail me out before I put my foot right in my mouth? No?
Go for it.
I hate my friends.
Yeah.
Okay, so between you and me, right? I think yes, right? So I agree with a certain amount of liberal minded. I don't want to call it paternalism, but I do want to call it wise direction, right? So I think that experts like you're a physician. If I have something wrong, you can give me wise direction that I can't give myself, right? But ideally, we, as a physician, you would, I've had some medical issues that are fairly serious recently, and talking with the physician, I went in and I say, Doc, just tell me what to do, right? And he's a really great guy, right? And he's like, no, we're going to have a discussion, and we're going to decide what to do, right? So I will answer your technical questions, and you're going to tell me how you want me to proceed with your treatment, right? So I think that machines will play a role in that, and there's nothing wrong with that. So where there is something wrong, I suppose, is does a government necessarily know what the best life to lead is? And when a government moves into that direction where they're trying to nudge people into their vision of the good life, that is where I think we have issues, right? So if it's citizens and the government all kind of talking and deciding in a nice democratic way about what the good life is, let's do that. If it's Papa, I run the world, that's telling me how to live, I don't want to do that, right?
Hello, thank you all for all your presentations. My question is for Dr. John. You brought the example about Samantha and her, and you said that the problem is that he discovered that she's loving like hundreds of people. How is that different than a false girl boyfriend or a wife or a gold digger, a hotline service, all of that? Why is it different?
Oh, okay. So Joaquin Phoenix's character believes that they have a genuine relationship up until this point in the movie. And so he's surprised that she's doing this. Now she believes, she at least reports believing, the AI, that she genuinely loves hundreds of people. And he says, how is that even possible? Or something like that. I don't remember exactly. But she says, well, actually, the more people I love, the more I love you. Right? So the confusing thing for us in the audience and for the character, for Joaquin Phoenix is, and I think this is probably the correct conclusion, is, well, that's not human love. That's not the way human love works. So in the cases you're describing, those seem to be just straightforward cases of deception, I guess. But in this case, it's that the conditions for the possibility of human love involve a kind of exclusion, a capacity to withdraw, and a sort of finite resources, finite capacity on the part of the person. The AI doesn't have that. So the AI is capable of conducting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of simultaneous conversations. The AI is capable of mimicking certain kinds of behaviors reliably and learning about those things. And so I think what Joaquin Phoenix is disturbed by isn't deception, and it's not unfaithfulness. It's that the machine actually is not capable of human love. So that's his realization. That's how I would read it.
Hello, good evening. I just wanted to ask a question. After the whole discussion, it seems as though AI, the problem with AI is that it lacks human, emotions, compassion, empathy, and consciousness, if you will. So do you think that this problem could be fixed by, sort of programming emotions? And if we could even program emotions, such as empathy, do you think it would be a good idea or a bad idea? Like, would it sort of backfire on us?
Claire?
Okay, let me see if I can try and answer that. So when you say program emotions, my mind right now as a coder is going, wow, where do you start? So the thing with AI, as you have said, is that we cannot, in essence, even us as humans right now, it's very hard to describe emotions, right? It's very hard to describe love, disappointment, all these things. And I would say that there's this term, it's called human-AI integration, right? So what happens is there are things that AI can do, and then there are things that humans can do, right? So we cannot let AI do everything the same way we're not letting ourselves as humans do everything. So that's where human-AI integration comes in. So the AI will do the programming, the hard numbers, all of that, right? And us as humans, now we are the ones to bring in the empathy, right? We have to make sure, one, the data is not biased, right? We have to make sure that the data that we're using or the algorithms are doing what they're supposed to do. We have to make sure that the output is as what we wanted to do. And if it's not, then why is it? Then trace our steps back. So I would say that the solution would not be necessarily to integrate emotions into AI, but to rather bring in an human-AI integrations to work together. And just to throw something else in, I feel like human-AI integration is better than just having AI alone, because there's a whole debate of, oh, AI is taking our jobs, right? But if we have human-AI integrations, then what we're saying is, no, AI is not taking your job. You can just learn how to work with AI. So, yeah.
اللي عندي مو سؤال، هو أمنية. أتمنى أن في النهاية الذكاء الاصطناعي يساعد الناس ولكن لا يحل مكان الناس.
She's saying that she hopes that AI will help people, but will not replace people's role in the world. Mm-hmm. So it's just a...
Hi, hello. So thank you so much for this informative informations. I would like to ask about the AI in medical field. As we have now in the country the National Transformation Program, which aims to digitalize the healthcare system. So I'm working in an organ transplant center, and now what we're trying to integrate the AI with the organ selections just to make the process fair. So the ethical dilemma or the issue we're facing with the AI is that whenever we have results like this patient should be before that patient, we do not really follow that decision. Mm-hmm. So like the patient will strongly disagree that the machine cannot decide whether I get or I don't get the cadaveric organ or a living donor organ. And also the physicians, they cannot really rely on the AI, and it's very costly. So I'm not really sure how to maximize the benefits of using the AI if we cannot trust the AI. Mm-hmm. So I would like to take your point of view regarding this, or like this a solution, or?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. So I have a paper on trust in AI in the medical context. So there's a whole lot we can say, but just to answer your question really quickly, I've seen this over and over again in my career. These kinds of systems don't get used, even if it turns out they actually are beneficial. Doctors and patients notoriously do not trust these machines. So even if it's in their best interest to do so. So one of the main reasons is transparency. I don't know how this system you're using works, but oftentimes they use machine learning of some sort, and it's really difficult to, if you're using many parameters to make this decision, you can't, the machine can't explain why I chose patient C over patient D, right? And it may, the machine may be right. Maybe C really does deserve it, but because the doctors and the patients can't follow the reasoning of the machine, they don't trust it, and it turns out poorly. So the way these machines, what I would counsel if I was counseling the designers of a machine like this would be to really focus on issues of trust and transparency, and make sure that your machine actually is producing better results, and really sell that to the doctors and the patients themselves, because nobody wants to hear, I didn't get a kidney, and it was based on algorithmic bias, right? Because it could be, right? It could definitely be the reason you didn't get it is because of some racial subgroup that you're part of, right? That wasn't programmed into the machine. The machine just kind of pulled it out of the data, but it's nonetheless real. And that's clearly an unethical outcome. So there's a whole lot to this, a lot to be said, and I don't envy you trying to solve that problem.
What I've seen in the field of security, it takes time to trust the technology.
Right.
So maybe with this generation of physician gone, the next generation might trust the result of the
Or they might
algorithms.
overtrust, right? This is the other worst problem, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for participating in the session. Thank you very much for the audience. Thank you for attending. And I also thank the Ministry of Culture and Scope for hosting this session. And have a good day.
Thank you. Bravo. Super fun.
Yeah.
Okay, get this off me.